Let's get into the panel now with Susie O'Brien, who's News Corp's National Education Editor. She joins us live from Melbourne. And Steve Senatiempo, Brekkie host on 2CC in Canberra, joining us, of course, from the nation's capital. But it's all happening in Victoria again. Susie, I've got to start with you again because there's so much going on there that's big news in Victoria, but around the nation. And first off, of course, I want to get to this crime crisis and the gang crime crisis. And over the years, we've heard so much denial from police and from politicians. Surely they're starting to realise now they've got a real crisis to deal with. Give us a sense of the community response in Melbourne.
I think people over the weekend were sickened when they heard that a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old were killed in a knife attack, a machete attack. As far as I know, the people who allegedly did it, youth, are still on the run. They haven't been caught yet. There was another young man from South Sudan who was killed in a drive-by shooting in the CBD a couple of days ago. There's one school in the outer suburbs that has had 2 kids die from stabbing attacks in the last 2 years alone. No wonder some people from African countries are saying it's safer back home than it is on the streets of Melbourne. And I think it's an absolute indictment on our city. And it's sad and shaming and embarrassing that people do not feel safe in their own homes or even out on the street.
Well said, Susie, and your reference to that story in the Herald Sun about African kids being sent to boarding school in Africa really hit home for me. I've had a bit to do with a school in Tanzania where a lot of Australians spend a lot of money helping Tanzanian kids get educated. But Stephen, to think that kids raised in Melbourne in African Australian families, their families are finding the money to somehow get them to boarding school back in Africa to get them away from both the risk of the crime and, of course, the whole gang scene. That surely is a cut-through moment with people reading about that today.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? That you have people come to Australia to give their kids a better life and they've got to send them back to where they came from to keep them safe. But I think there's a few things we need to acknowledge here. I mean, if we think about the gangland wars in Melbourne in the 80s and 90s and the bad old days of the Cross in Sydney in the 70s, organised crime and these gangs, they were less indiscriminate and innocent people rarely got caught in the crossfire. But nowadays we're seeing rampant violence, and until we're willing to, one, call it out, call it what it is, secondly, acknowledge that there are certain ethnic groups involved, but more importantly, worry more about protecting people and keeping people safe than offending people, well, this is going to keep on going the way it is in this rampant fashion.
Yeah, that is spot on. You've got to worry more about the crime and stopping the crime and getting offenders, not worrying about creating offence with the chattering classes. Now, the new opposition leader in Victoria strikes me as a bit of a wet lettuce, but he said the right thing on this today, I think.
Every single time we have another incident in the state, the Premier's got another excuse on why she hasn't done anything. Premier, my message back to you is quite simple. Back break bail-face jail. Give the police the resources they urgently need to keep the community safe and make sure we've got sentencing that is in line with community expectations to keep these crooks off the street.
That's what people want, Susie, and that's what people know works.
Well, this latest attack on the 12 and 15-year-olds, which apparently was a case of mistaken identity, was perpetrated by young people with machetes. Now, we just had a machete ban that came into force about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and yet they're blatantly, no one seems to care. No one seems to care about changes to the bail laws. No one seems to care about changes to the machete laws. So there has to be more done to keep people safe.
Yeah, more police, more resources. I want to stay in Victoria, and Stephen, I'll get your thoughts from outside on this. I warned on the night that the Voice was defeated. I said, don't think that you've gotten rid of these issues. All you've done is make sure there's no national oversight of all these things. The states are ploughing on ahead, and now there's going to be a treaty and a voice, and they're even saying every kid in school is going to be taught about Indigenous truth-telling. Now, if that's truthful, good, but I've got my doubts.
what is truth telling? The problem is we live in this post-truth world where truth is now subjective. We have people saying my truth and their truth and your truth. There's only one truth. It is the truth, and it's actuality. I've never understood what the concept of this truth telling is. I mean, when I was at school, we learned about Aboriginal history. I think it was true. Am I now being told that it's not? I don't understand what this concept means.
That's the trouble. They taught that we want truth telling. You want truth in history, but Susie, we get all this dark emu stuff instead.
Well, I think that I don't mind kids learning a version of truth, but as long as it's put against a broader context of the benefits of colonisation, i.e. we wouldn't have a modern-day Australia. So I don't mind them learning some of the stuff about colonisation and dispossession and, you know, alleged genocide, etc., as long as there's a broader context and a broader history, not just this is one view, this is the only view, this is our truth, so it must be everyone's truth. Because that's simply not the case.
Now, we have run out of time. I was going to, you know, my interest in dogs and the safety of people and children around dogs. I've got to point out that a 17-year-old girl, Annalise Blyton, she's died in hospital now days after being mauled by a friend's dog in Singleton in New South Wales. So another death from dogs. We've got to do better on this stuff. It's just shocking. But we'll come back to that issue another time. Thanks for joining us, Stephen and Susie. I appreciate it.